podcast. Yeah, we're gonna practice catching behind our backs today. A lot of people like doing that. It looks cool to be able to do that, and it builds your confidence. So I'm gonna try to get a guest on this podcast, and I'm saying try because I have no idea if they're gonna answer their phone, but we're gonna give it a go. So I'm gonna turn the air off here so we can hear everything, and we're gonna call Matt Gibson out of the blue. He doesn't know. Okay, all right. Matt Gibson, the king of wall ball.
Your call has been forwarded to an automatic voice message.
So today's podcast is not gonna include a guest. You know what? We'll make one more call. Maybe
later.
I agree. Okay, so let's just keep this podcast rolling. So we are focusing on catching behind the back. Before we start doing any demonstrations and walkthroughs, what we want to understand is that there's a lot of different ways to do anything. And I know that's very vague, but let me give you a specific example. There's a lot of different ways to throw a behind the back pass. You could throw it up towards your head. You could throw it closer down by your lower back. You could reach your hands far away and get the ball to release further from your body, or you could keep your hands tight and let you could let the stick hit your shoulder to release the ball, which would be really close to your body. So there's a lot of different ways to throw behind the back. And that's important to note because each of those different ways has a corresponding different release point. So if you think about the release point as a point in space in relation to your body, each time you throw a ball, you want to make note of where that release point was. Where did the ball leave your stick in relation to your body? And every time you use your hands in a different way, whether you let them go lower or higher or somewhere in the middle, or you keep them tight or you reach them out, that's all going to play a factor in where that ball ends up leaving your stick. And so once we become more in tune with this concept of noticing the release point behind ourselves for all these BTB releases, we start to understand that, well, I could get my stick to that position if the ball were to come at that spot behind me. So if we're going to start practicing catching behind the back, we want to understand that there's a lot of different places you might have to get your stick to behind yourself to catch that ball. And so by practicing BTBs with a lot of different release points, you become more in tune with those positions behind your back, and ultimately will get better at catching behind your back. So that's sort of the precursor to this. Is we'll focus on different BTB releases, and then we'll progress that to trying to catch behind our back. All right, let's hit the wall. First things first, behind the back throws. All right, find your consistent release point. I'm not trying to switch it up right now. I'm trying to find one spot and be super consistent about it. So when I release this, I'm gonna call this a foot above into the back of my head, roughly. So now what I'm gonna try to do is catch it there. So instead of throwing it from that position, I'm gonna throw it overhand.
Maybe don't catch it behind the head for 2 more seconds.
No, you're fine. We're just not. There's a nice family walking by. We don't want to hit them. Okay, so I was just throwing at BTB with a specific release point in mind and trying to be consistent. Now I'm going to throw overhand with the intent of trying to get the ball to hit that spot behind myself that I was just releasing from. So I'm going to try to translate this from BTB throw from a specific spot to catch. All right, there's my first drop. So that's an example of trying to pick a spot to catch it if I feel comfortable throwing it from there. But as said before, we want to have a ton of different release points behind the back. Some that are real close to our body. And some can reach further, get that ball to leave my stick further from my body. All right, and each time I do this, what I'm trying to be cognizant of is that release point in relation to, say, the back of my head. I have a rough gauge on where that ball is leaving my stick in relation to the distance to the back of my head. And now I'll try to go all BTB catches without chasing it too much, which is going to be a lot to ask. Start nice and simple with some lobs. All right, one little ball flannel. Although I'm teaching this, I haven't practiced it in quite some time, and that's showing. It's showing right now. So we're going to keep this going here. So a common mistake is leaving my stick behind my body and just hoping it lands there. So if I throw it and immediately bring my stick back and hope it lands in, I often don't have consistency catching it. So we wait basically as long as possible. So as that ball's on its way back, I'm just gonna leave my stick next to my ear on my stick side, and then as it gets closer and closer, I'll reach back. It's towards the last second to grab that ball. And again, oh, nice save, Leno. My lack of practice on this particular skill is showing. I'm gonna actually bring my stick back after I throw and then go back for the catch. All right, gives me a little more of a realistic feel as far as going and getting that ball. All right, so now I've practiced for about, it's been 10 minutes here. Some of my muscle memory is starting to come back.
And now we are quickly going to shift to our interview with Matt Gibson before getting back into more wall ball talk. I hope you enjoy.
Ooh. All right, Gibby, what's up, man? Thanks for turning this around on such short notice.
Yeah, for sure. This is the quickest anything's ever come together for me on a podcast.
Wow, that's a huge compliment. We did a random fucking wall ball video, catching behind the back. That's what we just worked on for my podcast. But I was gonna ask you about yours, the No Angle podcast. What kind of prompted you to start that?
I think, well, to be fully frank, it's because I'd like to do a non-lacrosse podcast of my own, and this is kind of just getting the production kinks out of the way. But on a more, like, the actual reason is because I think a lot of the stuff doesn't get discussed, and I think lacrosse being a smaller sport, there's this leaning towards everything is like, you don't want to put every time you make something lacrosse related, you're tasked with representing the sport as a whole. So
just because there's such little people, talking about it, right?
Exactly. When you hear a lot of these podcasts or interviews, it's always, you're so great, the sport is so great, tell us, how you did this, and there's not a lot of honest discussion about maybe the different routes that the sport could go in to be a better product, or just talk about anything, right? There's not a lot of avenues to just shoot the shit. So I think that's the one of the underlying reasons.
I like it. Yeah, I agree. There's a lot of growth, I feel like, around podcasts right now, where people are doing more experimenting, obviously, myself and yourself included.
Yeah, for sure. And just longer form conversations like that, I think, the more you script something, the more you seem infallible.
Yeah.
And I think that doing a podcast is also...
Hey, just do me a favor. Don't use big words like infallible. I don't know what that means.
The more you script something, the more it can seem like you're incapable of making mistakes. But with these form podcast type stuff, there's a humility to it, because if you speak for 2 hours, there's not a person on the planet who's going to please everyone or not miss steps. Right. So there's kind of a...
I like it, man. It's a little bit more raw.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Good shit. Well, just quickly, on the topic of what we talked about earlier on this podcast, at least, what kind of prompted you to get really, really good at catching behind your back?
Yeah, it's a good question. To be honest, I think the biggest thing was that String King got a new office that had this pristine wall.
Is this not the newer one, right? The OG String King Stadium, that black wall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was really cool in there, and so I would just spend a lot of time in there throwing it. So it was a combination of having that wall there, and then also I just get bored really quickly. So if I get good at something, I don't really go in and just keep repeating stuff that I'm good at.
That's actually such a great segue. Yeah. That's super interesting, man. One of the things, one preemptive question before I go on a quick rant is, are you spending time coaching right now, or is that something I know you did for a little bit? You're not doing that right now, correct?
No.
All right. Yeah, that's what I figured. So my comment was just basically to get your feedback on this sort of phenomena, which is obviously I do a shit ton of coaching, and it requires a lot of patience, as you know. But it's super interesting how when an athlete tries something that they've never done before, like for example catching behind the back, how quickly they get frustrated that they're not good at it when they've never actually practiced it before. So it's almost like a delirium situation, because they're not being honest with themselves about how hard something is to get good at, and then they lack the patience to work at it, in a step-by-step manner, and slowing things down and things like that. It's just interesting. I feel like you could talk on that.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, as someone who whether I like it or not, there's a big digital footprint of me playing lacrosse on the internet. So I was talking to Jared Raganese. You don't really see too many of the ball hitting me or me missing it, but obviously that's the majority of time is failure. So it can be. Some people obviously have a better stick than others, and they're building on a better foundation if they put in the previous work. But the reality is that, like you said, it takes a long time to get really good at anything. So if you're watching someone who's the best at it and thinking that you're going to do that quickly, then I think that would be naive, not only in wall ball but in life. So
yeah, man, that's great. All right, well, let me just jump around here, switch topics. What is your favorite food to cook?
Favorite food to cook? Probably like breakfast scramble eggs with vegetables.
Like a garbage bowl situation?
Yeah, like it's like maybe this will be an omelet, but I'll botch the architecture and it's going to be a scramble is usually how it works for me. But I like that because I like breakfast a lot, and it's healthy and it's easy to cook.
Yeah. You know what I've been doing too, dude, which I recently got into, is cooking the eggs at a super low temperature. It requires a little more patience, but you just can't get that consistency otherwise. It's incredible.
And keep it a little fluffy and
yeah, man.
Yeah, and keep some of the moisture. Yeah, I'm not talented enough to do that, but I'll work towards it, like the wall ball thing.
For sure. Well, all right, man. Hey, dude, thank you for taking my call. I think we got to schedule me coming out there. I talked to the String King guys. I'm just going to kind of shamelessly plug myself. If they do see this, let's get this ball rolling. Get me out there to the No Angle podcast. I feel like, dude, we talked about this a couple years ago. Where were we at the convention there? Yeah, right. We were like, dude, when we start hanging out, it's going to be a fucking content.
What's the status of that? Who are they supposed to be booking you something?
Dude, it's fucking, we got to talk to Shane and Mark. I don't know. It's somewhere in there. And Kit. But he's the hardest human being, maybe other than you, to actually get on the phone. So it's just such a fucking miracle.
Yeah, well, I thought it was funny how you called and I missed your first call after telling you to call me.
Well, to be honest with you, we hung up because I freaked out. I was all nervous. We called you and I was like, no, I'm not ready.
Why don't you just text me a date? There a string of dates, and then there's only so many people here. And speak to the powers that be.
Yeah, it's a lean operation. People don't understand what's going on over there. All right, good shit, man. Well, thanks again, and yeah, man, we'll talk soon.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for chatting with me.
Of course.
And send me those dates.
Yeah, sounds good.
All right, talk soon.
All right, well, thank you for tuning into this podcast. A lot of clients and a lot of athletes that I've coached, there's this interesting scenario where frustration sets in for an athlete at the time of a mistake. So we can all relate to that. You make a mistake, you get frustrated. It's a very common thing. But what's interesting about it to me is that in the environment of learning a new skill, when you don't perform a skill that you've never performed well, when you don't perform it well and you've never done it before, you can't be surprised that you're not good at it. I think that's an important distinction for young athletes to make, because it forces them to be more critical of themselves, more of an orientation around self-auditing and being self-aware, right? What are you good at? What does need more work than other things? And if you're working your offhand and you're going and you can't catch a ball because, you're frustrated and you get, to the point where you just drop it all together and you go back to your strong hand, it's one thing to get frustrated because you want to do well. It's another thing to get frustrated because you can't believe that you're not doing something well when you've never actually practiced it, right? So in the context of lacrosse practice and wall ball and stuff like that, make sure that you are trying to challenge yourself appropriately, which that's something that we want to try to continue to give context to, right? What does that really mean to challenge yourself appropriately? And, if it's something that you're doing that you're not able to do consistently, try to give a clear picture in your own mind of, okay, A, is this something important? Do I need to be practicing it? And B, is this something that I've gotten good at in the past? And if I haven't, then I probably have to work a little harder at it to get good at it. And if we start to make that distinction, again, we're preaching the work side of it, obviously smarter, but you still have to put in the work, even if it's frustrating to not be good at something right away. That's all right, right? And if you have aspirations to be a great and elite level player, that is the route that we're going to have to take, is that consistent improvement, minute improvements on a consistent basis. All right, hopefully you guys enjoyed this podcast. Hopefully I have a conversation with Matt Gibson on this podcast. I don't know if I did or didn't. You should already know at this point, because we would have put it back. All right, peace.